So what would you do if your family or friends that were going to high school right now passed all the classes and they got all the units they needed to graduate, but then at the end they found out they can't graduate? In 2006, 42,000 students, that's what happened to them, and that's because in 2006 the California high school exit exam was a required thing for graduation. According to an article from LAU, I'm sorry, I just said that. So, according to the California Department of Education, the primary purpose of the California high school exam is to improve student achievement in public schools with reading, writing, and mathematics. I believe that the California high school exit exam has a negative impact on students, and I believe that reason is because, number one, it's discriminatory against certain students. Number two, it doesn't really measure how much a student learns, and number three is has a significant decrease in graduation rates. Okay, so first I would explain why I believe the California high school exit exam discriminates. And according to a research conducted in the Education Policy and Practice at Stanford University, a new study reveals that the exit exam has reduced graduation rates among girls and students of color by nearly 20%. So from the people that already don't graduate, an additional 20% is just on girls and students of color. For Black, Latino, and Asian graduation, the graduation rate declined 15 to 19% more, and then the graduation rate for white students only declined by 1%. According to Carrie Ulisi and Joy Spencer, the California schools suffer from physical deterioration and inadequate instructional materials, a lack of qualified teachers, and unequal distribution of academics courses. For example, a poll of public school teachers found that students in low-income children are 12 times as likely to be taught by unqualified teachers and almost 4 times likely to have serious turnover problems with their staff. Also, students who have more, schools who have more students of color receive less funding than schools that have less. And a UCLA report found that schools with 90% of color spend $6,634 per student, while schools with less, like 49%, spend $7,268 per student. And then another group of people that this test targets is students with disabilities. According to Christina Samuels, 30% of students with disabilities who passed the test for the first time compared to 74% of the students who passed it without disabilities. Okay, so far I explained why I feel it's discriminatory. Now I'll explain how the test fails to measure how much a student has learned. Dr. Sean Reardon, Associate Professor of Education at Stanford University, cannot find any evidence that shows that the students who took the test learned any more than the students who didn't take the test. And that fails to show that the California high school exit exam has helped improve student achievement. And then also, the California high school exit exam is just one test that has 3 different parts, but one test doesn't really tell you how much a student has learned. The American Psychological Association, the American Research Association, and the American Evaluation Association are experts in measuring what really determines how much you really learn. They measure everything, and they believe that tests don't measure all things. Some some tools that they believe in can be like assessments or projects, performances, portfolios, reports, interviews, and reflections. Like all of that together can give you an idea of whether somebody is ready or not just one test. So now that I discussed how it doesn't measure how much a student has learned, I'll talk about the high school exit time decreases graduation rates. According to article Exit Exams Decreases Graduation Rates, one paper concludes that tests cause a 2% increase in dropout rate, which is in a year for 40,000 students per year. And then in the beginning I said out of the 4,200 students, 42,000 students that didn't receive a diploma, 1,600 of those received a GED. And a GED is better than a diploma, but it obviously has less value. And so I've discussed why I feel that the high school exam has a negative effect on students.
All right, the propositions labeled pretty clearly, as are the secondary claims. When you get to them, they're also pretty clear. I do think that most of the arguments that you present, though, have less to do with the test than they have to do with the schools, that the schools are underfunded, that certain groups are represented in some schools more than others, that those groups have difficulty passing the test. Those are all indications with the education that they're getting. They're not necessarily problems with the test itself. And so I think that without a little bit more analysis of whether or not the test is a valid measure of the things that it claims to measure, you're missing the point on some of those issues, even though you've got good data on those things. For example, you mentioned, for instance, that the number of girls and the number of people of color who fail to pass has gone to 20%, and because of that, you assume that it's discriminatory. I'm not sure that that means that it's discriminatory. That just means that a group of people are not passing it. It happens to be that group of people. Now, if you could show that the test is in some way written so that women or people of color are less likely to pass because of the way the test is written, then I think you've got something that suggests it's discriminatory. Otherwise, it's just, here's a 5-foot-high brick wall, jump over it, and 20% of the people can't jump over the wall. The brick wall is the brick wall. I'm not sure it's discriminatory. It's just it means some people can't do the particular task that's being presented. What you need to show is that the test is really, that there's some problem with the way the questions are worded, or that it's not reflective of what the students are learning in the schools, for instance. And I think you've got a good argument there about the problems with the schools, but it needs to be integrated into the argument about the test itself. Maybe there's an argument that says that the schools where the students are failing the test are the ones that are least prepared, and so that's the reason that they're not passing the test. It's not that they are incapable, but the schools are failing, which might be another thing that the test ought to be measuring, whether or not the schools are working as opposed to whether or not the students are getting what they need out of it. All right, thank you.